Thank you, Chairman and Ranking Member, for holding this meeting today. And I want to thank our witnesses for being here. I'm out in my district, a rural part of my district. And so I thought I'd just take a little bit and share what their perspective is on democracy in the region. And it really mostly centers around what's going on with China. You know, all too often, I think we make the mistake that the people of China and the Chinese Communist Party, or CCP, are the same. But it's important to remember that the desire for freedom and a demand for self-reliance and human rights exists throughout much of the population of China. It's not so, of course, with the totalitarians of the CCP, and in particular Xi Jinping. President Xi has ushered in an unprecedented era of authoritarianism, not seen since Mao's years. From tearing down crosses at churches and erecting his own image in their place, to cultural and ethnic genocide against the Uyghurs in Xinjiang, Xi has gone beyond even Deng Xiaoping, who was only a few years removed from Mao. Let me take a moment and frame the mindset of the current CCP leadership in a historical context. After Tiananmen Square, where hundreds, potentially thousands of protesters were massacred, President Bush sent former Secretary of State Kissinger on a secret mission to China. He observed, and I quote, "The Chinese leaders were stunned by the reaction of the outside world. They could not understand why the United States took umbrage at an event that had injured no American material interests," end quote. A party official told Kissinger again, quote, "We don't like to hear that others ask us what to do. Americans like to ask others, do this or do that. The Chinese people do not want to yield to others," end quote. Fast forward to when Nikki Haley was serving as ambassador to the United Nations, confronted the Chinese delegates about the Uyghurs in Xinjiang. She essentially said that their leaders were shocked. We didn't understand that these were just terrorists. They seemed to communicate a right to wipe the Uyghurs off the map for the acts of a few criminals, and the world had no right to tell them what to do. Now, the current communist emperor in China has made it clear they still don't want to be lectured on human rights, human dignity, and the value of freedom. But that doesn't mean we don't have options or an obligation to live within our values. Recall after the Holocaust the phrase, "never again." The world can never again sit by and tolerate genocide. We acted in Rwanda, and we have an obligation to act now, because never again is happening again in Xinjiang. The question, of course, is, what does that look like? Because while China asserts its Westphalian right to have no country meddle in its internal affairs, the United States has a right, and I said above, an obligation, to choose with whom we do business and how we support our allies. Militarize the man-made islands in the South China Sea against the findings of an international court, we have every right to navigate those seas. Conduct debt trap and wolf warrior diplomacy with our allies, well, we will work to reverse the economic freedoms that we granted. Steal the intellectual property of our companies, we will continue to sue in court and create legislation and agreements which force China's hand. Hack our defense systems to advance their own military buildup so through might they can continue their intimidation. Well, we'll shift forces to the Indo-Pacific, and we'll build the advanced weapon systems with which no nation in the history of man has ever been able to compete. If they were so good at it, why would they steal ours? The choice is and always has belonged to the leadership of the CCP. America worked to grow our relationship with China, and as the country opened up and stood up, to use Deng and Mao's own words, that improved relationship with us and our friends, along with a good bit of intellectual property theft, and to be honest, a lot of hard work by industrious Chinese people, has created an economic powerhouse. But the termination of the grace we gave, in light of the return to an authoritarian implementation of socialism and communism, is our right as well. And China should not be surprised by our response. America has a right to choose how we interact with nations, behave responsibly, and see a flourishing friendship. Wrongfully imprison an entire people group, and well, we're going to act. Create the lie that a pandemic started in a wet market from a pangolin that no one has found yet to hide a likely laboratory leak and your own culpability. Well, don't be surprised when the rest of the world is pissed off and expectant of some restitution for those losses. The people of China should understand the new situation of a world standing up to the CCP as a result of their authoritarian actions, specifically the totalitarian leader of Xi Jinping. We want nothing more than a great relationship with the Chinese people. However, Xi's actions are deplorable, and they violate the very human right of freedom and self-determination, and the United States has every right to choose our partners based on their conduct and values. My only question to our witnesses today is, can you describe how Xi Jinping is different from his predecessors in regards to human rights and relations with the West?